Welcome to Let's Accelerate. My name is Michael. I'm here with Uwe. We are from Bosch Management Consulting Innovation. And today we have a very special guest, one of our longtime partners, Mark Searle. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you work, how you got there? I know you love to speak, so let's do this as you will.
I don't want to say that I've become a professional talker. It's not strictly true, but sometimes it feels that way. So yeah, thanks for trying to rein me in, Michael, already before I've said my first word. Thanks for inviting me to join the podcast. Let's accelerate. My background and what I do. I currently I have two jobs. I have a part-time job at the University of California at Berkeley in the College of Engineering, where I'm a lecturer and industry fellow inside the Sutarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. And since entrepreneurship's right in the name of the center where I work, it makes sense that most of my adult life I've been working in entrepreneurial ventures. So after I finished an MBA in the mid 90s, I spent a little time as a management consultant at Deloitte and Touche, less than a year at Deloitte Consulting, before embarking on an entrepreneurial career that took me through 8 different startups as either the chief operating officer or the CEO across 20 years. And then for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been putting the knowledge I gained in all of those experiences to work teaching entrepreneurs globally, part-time inside the University of California where I teach students, and then also outside with my own business called the Innovation Acceleration Group, where we work with both entrepreneurial innovators and corporate innovators such as yourselves, helping bring new businesses to market.
So to jump in, I already have a question. It
Yep.
just popped in my mind while I was listening to. We talk a lot about the success and failure rates when you do truly breakthrough innovation. I will assume that your startup ventures, you were 8 for 8 successful. Is that correct?
You would be incorrect in your assumption about that. I actually feel like I had, I think, a reasonable track record of those 8. We had 2 of them actually successfully went public on stock markets. 2 of them, I guess 3 now, were actually sold for some number of dollars greater than zero, which I won't disclose. Not all of them were, not all of those 3 sales were for a great return for the investors. There's one that's still operating, and so we don't know the outcome of that. And then there were 2 that really were tragic disasters and crashed and burned and lost. Every dollar of investment that came in was lost by the investors, some of whom were relatives and friends of mine. That was
So just
costly.
just
So,
just to summarize your 8 of 8, we hear a lot of, I think, mythology around innovation and startups. You were the same person in all 8.
that's right.
What would you attribute the successes or the failures to? And probably they were all good ideas. Maybe they weren't. Maybe it was timing. What would you say? How would you summarize maybe in the 3 top things that either create success or failure?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's interesting the way you phrased it, which is to say not pick one thing, but pick 3, or and also, each one's different. But in my experience, a lot had to do with our ability to be flexible in the early years. So our ability to there's jargon around all of these things, but to pivot from a business model to another. So both of the 2 biggest successes that had IPOs on NASDAQ dramatically changed their business model into something completely different. I mean, literally, one was started out as a video game and ended up being virtual tours for online real estate listings. Totally different market, same technology behind it, totally different market, totally different value proposition for a different customer segment. Everything was different about, and our ability to pivot and meet the market need that was in front of us really helped the successful ones. The ones that failed, I think we never found that, whether we were willing to pivot or we were too stubborn or we just never successfully pivoted enough to find product market fit. Many times I found myself selling something where I wanted to shake the customer and say, don't you understand that you need this? And they just didn't. So I thought I was so much smarter than them. I actually had a co-founder who came out of a customer meeting and said, oh, those customers just don't get it. And it's like, well, yeah, actually they get their life, and we were trying to impose our life on them. And those tended not to work out as well.
So looking more to corporate innovation, as you know, Mark, that's what we are doing at Bosch, and many other corporates are facing similar challenges, that they want to innovate typically beyond their existing core.
Right.
And you made your point that you've quite a lot of experience around corporate innovation. So what would you say, beyond your individual startup experience, what are the particular challenges in a corporate environment still in 21?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and you're right. I have worked with a lot of corporations. I mean, obviously, you guys know me quite well because we've been working together for several years across Bosch globally. But I've also worked with large corporates in the U.S. and other countries, including Caterpillar and Fuji and Xerox and a variety. And I think that a number of things stand in the way of truly disruptive innovation inside corporate environments. A large part of problem just comes from the lack of willingness to take a risk. And so what I mean by that is, inherent in this idea, people talk about, any new venture, whether it's inside a corporate or out in the entrepreneurial world, has a, likely a less than 10% chance across all new business ideas of actually succeeding. And that's just more risk than a lot of corporates are willing to take, to say, well, we're gonna test 9 ideas to get to, one that works out, test 10 to get one that works out. I think that a lot of that comes from also a cultural problem inside big companies, which is they think that to test an idea, you have to actually build the whole new business before launch. And that goes against the principles. Startups are forced to do lots of nimble testing because they don't have resources. And corporates think that their great competitive advantage in the world is all their resources, which gives them an impetus to try to use those resources, which actually is the exact opposite of what they should be doing. They should be testing a lot of ideas quickly in a lightweight way, using, again, there's jargon, so we can say it's a variation on lean principles or lean startup. But it doesn't matter what you call it. The point is, how do we effectively validate, invalidate business models quickly and cheaply so that we invest in the right ones? And I think that's a really difficult idea for corporates to embrace, because it's just not how they do most of their business. Most of their business is quite heavyweight in terms of process and procedures and conforming to to a lot of established business process.
Don't you think, Mark, that comes back to, do they even accept that the failure rates when you do venturing beyond your core business are so high? So if you don't even recognize that they're so high because in your core business you've been successful for a very long time, doesn't that already start the problem? Because then you have no idea that you need to test a lot of ideas.
Michael, I think what you've hit on there, I'm laughing I'm sort of smiling and laughing because I actually have a story about this where a very large company actually with global headquarters in Germany, much like Bosch, though not Bosch, and actually in a variety of industries like Bosch, came to us at UC Berkeley asking for help with accelerating their new venture ideas inside their company. And we were talking, my colleagues and I were talking to them about testing lots of ideas, and they said, no, we don't need to do that. We actually are going to run 2 new business ideas per year, and they're guaranteed to succeed. We just need you to help us with acceleration. And that line that they said they're guaranteed to succeed made no sense. It was like a collision in our brain. I didn't understand what they meant. So I asked, and they said, well, these are the ideas that were chosen by our senior vice presidents, and so they're guaranteed to succeed. And that's entirely backwards, because the senior vice presidents are not the target customers of any of these businesses. It's a culture, I think, that that grows up in companies. I tell my entrepreneurial students that much of success in new ventures comes from balancing what seem like opposite characteristics. And this is, you have to have the confidence, I would say even sometimes the arrogance, to think your idea can succeed and change the world, combined with the humility to understand you actually don't know what's going to work. And it's this confidence with humility and the willingness to learn. And I think that I had a story when I was an entrepreneur CEO. I had a venture capitalist who was on my board of directors, and he came to me and he said, you need to have a product that's absolutely required by the Fortune 500 companies. And I just thought in the moment, it's like, well, if you're already in the Fortune 500, then you don't think you need anything. Like, that's the wrong place to start, because if you're there, you've sort of made it. So if you're a top company, I mean, if you're a Bosch, if you're a, fill in the blank, right? One of the greatest companies in the world, you've inherently got the idea that you're doing everything right and you want to keep doing things right. And then you insert this thing that says, well, we need to innovate as well and we need to disrupt ourselves. Well, that's nice to say, but changing the attitude and changing the personality and the culture is really going to be critical. And part of that culture is just what you hit on, Michael, which is this idea of accepting you could be wrong. In fact, you're almost certain to be wrong with your first idea, and to listen to what the market tells you. Yeah.
So what you're touching upon is this differentiation between explore and exploit. We also love to talk about this subject. And the reason why senior leaders believe they can also forecast which new venture will be successful is because they were dramatically successful in their existing core business.
That's right.
Have you seen good examples, good corporations where this belief of running an ambidextrous organization is already sufficiently addressed, sufficiently fulfilled, where this understanding, hang on, is this now a new venture in an explorative way, or is this our next existing core business product? So have you seen an organization who is running such an innovation portfolio, both exploit and explore, and also having this cultural understanding, as you pointed out?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the risk of sounding like I'm just being nice to my hosts, in my global travels, the company that's actually done a best job with this so far that I've seen personally is Bosch. And one of the important things about Bosch itself is counterintuitive, which is it's obviously originally a German company, it's global now, and there's stereotypes about German culture, but it's also a very engineering-oriented company. But what enabled, in my opinion, Bosch to embrace this idea was the fact that you guys approached this from a engineering mindset. Because I think that people hear the idea that, well, we have to have an innovation culture, and they get distracted by thinking that culture is somehow we can change our culture by declaring it's different, that we can have an all-company meeting and say, we're going to be innovative starting today, and that changes it. And what Bosch understood was culture grows out of practice. Like, what we actually do, the processes that we actually use are our culture. It's not that we have one set of processes and then we can just declare that we're innovative on top of that. So Bosch has done a really great job of instantiating a set of business practices that drive innovation and that welcome new innovations. A lot of companies I've seen are good at having brainstorming sessions and coming up with ideas, and they're really terrible at segmenting those ideas into the ones to pursue, sorting, not segmenting, but sorting those ideas into ones that have a future and ones that don't. And that leads to this problem of the zombies, right? The things that go on forever because some senior executive likes this project and it never finds customers, and anybody that works on it is sort of in a dead end, but they never kill it, while something else just never gets explored that could have been had a good future. Now, I have seen other companies start to embrace a different attitude. Caterpillar comes to mind as somebody who really understood some years back that they needed to innovate, and specifically around business models, because they had a great portfolio of products, but there were a lot of different ways, different customers they could reach by changing their business models. And I've seen some other folks that I can't mention their names because my work with them is confidential. But what I've seen in every one is that the secret is, or the key, I guess, that unlocks a lot of innovation is building a process for what to do with your company's good ideas. It's building a process that enables you to have a repeatable business process for dealing with new ideas, because the problem isn't generating the ideas. The idea is the challenge is sorting and investing in the ones that are most likely to succeed.
Let me ask a follow-up question here. There are many, typically in a corporate organization, there are many, we would call them submarine projects. So projects not so well known to others, and people are quite confident that it's rightly so. You may invest in this idea several years of engineering time and maybe also budget, because they are of the belief that suddenly and finally this submarine will be, dramatically successful at the end of the day. So sometimes people tell and give the indication you just have to wait long enough. Yeah, would you agree, or what would you tell these people? Who just want to be more patient and who are just asking for more time and budget?
Well, I mean, if you're just asking for more time and budget, I'm not a nice person, so I would say, go away. You said it's a submarine project, so it's the U-boat. I would sink the U-boat. No, but being more serious about it, the point isn't, to me, somebody coming and saying, I need more budget. It's always, I think, valuable to ask the question why. So why do you believe? Why? I mean, not just why do you need more budget? Well, because it hasn't worked yet. But trust me, there's this. I think it was an old Deming quote. It's Ronald Reagan who said, "Trust but verify." It's like, of course, we trust our employees, but we want to, verify. Show me why you believe it will be successful in the end, and that comes to, what's your evidence? What's the evidence that you have? Do you have customers? Do you have 100 customers who have told you in, a live conversation, or maybe in the time of the pandemic, maybe it's over a video call or in email, in some way they've explicitly told you, I will buy this. I just can't today because my budget isn't here, but I will have the budget, and here's my plan. That's, to me, evidence that, yes, it's worth waiting. If your evidence that it's worth waiting and investing is just your good feeling about that everybody's going to need this, I believe it, then I have no patience for that. I just would say, yeah, that's not good enough. I mean, I might really love the idea myself too, but unless I am the target customer and you can build your whole business with me as your customer, then what I think doesn't matter. It really is.
To build on that, Uwe's question and your answer there, one of the reasons I think, and this is totally my theory, so it could be obviously very wrong, that one of the reasons I believe that happens is that in a corporate culture, and probably in the startup world as well, there's a hyper focus on technology. So if we just have the right technology, then the customers will just sort of appear. Yeah. And the behavior of a lot of submarine projects is they believe they have that right technology, but they haven't actually subjected it, the entire business model, which technology is just part of a business model, to deliver it, to the test of the market yet. And they sort of get into a development paradise, so like a sort of glorified science project in the end if you haven't actually tested it. What do you see there? How do you balance tech development with the business model development?
No, I mean, I really like the distinctions you've made there. To me, there's three different things. There's technology, there's products and services that are built on technology, and then there's business models that are designed to deliver those products to market. And really, they're not designed to deliver products. This is this critical distinction, and Osterwalder's work and Steve Blank's work have really informed a lot of this, which is a business model exists to deliver a value proposition to a customer, right? So it delivers one or more value propositions to one or more customer segments. And the only way to have a successful business is to have a successful business model. And that includes everything, as you know, not just the product and not just the technology, which is itself a part of a product package, which is itself only useful to the world if it's inside a scalable business model, a deliverable and sustainable business model. So I think those distinctions that you make are exactly right. And everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people make the mistake, and it's the Field of Dreams mistake. It's makes reference to an American movie about baseball, which is an American sport. So our global audience for this podcast may not understand it, but the phrase from that is, as you remember, Michael, is, if you build it, they will come. And the idea is, if you make this thing, if you just make this perfect thing, the customers will just arrive. And I can't tell you the number of entrepreneurs who make that mistake. And corporates make it for a different reason. Entrepreneurs make it because they're so convinced that they're a genius and they're the next, fill in the blank, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, or whatever. And they're not embracing, they're not finding their own humility. Corporates make that mistake for a different reason, which is it's not that they think they have the individual genius. It's that they think they're so well positioned with their customers in the market that the customers will just come to this entirely innovative new product just because it's from this great company, right? It's akin to saying we're Coca-Cola. We can change the formula of our flagship drink and create new Coke, and people will just come because we've got this new technology, which is a new recipe. And it was a disaster, right? I mean, it's so long ago, people don't remember, but they tried to change Coca-Cola, and that was their great innovation. And all it did was make everybody angry.
What's incredible about that, and I find it entirely fascinating, that was their core business. They should have told their customers, but they actually didn't. They didn't even understand the real value behind it, and part of it was tradition. But I wanted to jump on that and say that I think in corporate, a lot of times people get confused about this because in the core, it has worked that you develop a technology, but it's a little bit more incremental. It's the next generation of something, maybe a little bit farther than incremental, maybe even adjacent. But it still goes back to this. When you venture far away from the core and you start doing fundamentally new things in your business model, then it gets even more dangerous. But it's a good reminder, that Coca-Cola example.
That's a good question. Doesn't it also then provoke the question, Michael and Mark, and I would ask Mark to answer here. Should a corporate even think about explorative innovation? Shouldn't they be better off just to concentrate on adjacencies? What's your thought on that, Mark?
Well, I have a very strong opinion about this, and actually it's been captured a couple times. I can self-promote and say I've got, lectures that are published on this online. But to me, remember, our goal is always to increase the value of our organization, and we do that by delivering more value to others. And so our mission has to be to deliver more value to more people. And what we see in our time, I mean, we all live in 2021 and we're living through the pandemic. And in the last 10, 20 years, everybody talks about how the world changes at a faster rate. And what that means is your customers are changing at a faster rate. And that means what's valuable to your customers is changing too. And so to me, in order to fulfill your mission of delivering more value to more people over time, you can't do it if you aren't exploring outside the core, because even your core customers over time are going to change. Their requirements and needs and desires are going to change as other technologies come to market, as other world events happen, as just all of the things around us change. And so if you're not continuing to explore, you're condemning yourself to only deliver value in the way that you are today for the people that you are today. So I think the need to explore other markets, which is to say delivering value to other people, which might be exploring different geographical areas or different economic areas or whatever it is, finding new people to whom you can deliver value by innovating on business model, not just on product, or finding entirely new product areas to deliver to your existing customers, things that they might not, expect to buy from you. But then it's like, oh, you guys have this too. I've seen Bosch innovate around some service-enabled technologies in the construction industry. It's a great example, right? People say, well, Bosch, we know Bosch from power tools, we know Bosch from certain things. Oh, but here's a technology-enabled service like construction management that actually, I have this brand, I trust them from a different place. Well, I'm interested in what they can do for me. And then if you get the right value proposition for the right customer segment, now you've got magic. So I think that continued growth, and in the end, really continued, I would argue, survival at some level, depends on, I think, companies' ability to continuously find new ways to deliver value to new customers. That's my view.
Including radical innovation, because that would be the third layer, core, adjacent, radical.
Well, I mean, I think that you can get, there's no perfect recipe for what's the percentage. But my point is that if you're not looking at what you're calling radical innovation, which is to say innovations that aren't just incremental enhancements to your existing product and service portfolio, but are really, very different in some way, very different customer, very different, product area or something like that. I just think if you're not embracing what you're calling radical innovations with some % of your time and energy, then again, you're condemning yourself to a future that will inherently shrink, because you'll be delivering a value to a customer set. You can add incrementally, but over time, unless you're doing something that's radical enough, the customers are going to change. That's a given. Their needs are going to change, their requirements, what's available to them, your competitive landscape. It's all going to keep changing. And if you don't prepare yourself by always having something that you, Uwe, would describe as radical, then I think you're just going to lose your existing customers, and you won't have a way to get new ones to replace them. So, I think about this, and it's a bad example because it's not a corporate example; it's a government example. But post offices, the U.S. Postal Service, I think, has been very challenged to. I actually have a friend who works in innovation at the post office, brilliant guy, and he's super challenged because he's got an organization that won't let him innovate enough outside the core. And there's a lot of things they could do. There's a lot of resources they have, technologies they have that could deliver new value to new customers or new value to their existing customers. And they're just not embracing it because they won't think outside their core value propositions.
Maybe to change directions a little bit.
Yep.
As we've mentioned that we've been working together, 3, 4, 5 years now. We've managed to implement what we would call this innovation funnel, testing 200 projects over 3, 4 years. That's lightning speed in a corporate environment. This question's for you, and maybe it's something Uwe and I can reflect on while you're answering. Maybe it's something we've learned. What have you learned that you didn't know before you started with us on this journey?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. And what did I learn that I didn't know? Well, there's a lot of very Bosch specific things that I learned around your management structure and everything else. But I think to generalize it, what I've learned, so powerfully in helping and working with you guys, running, as you said, over 200 ideas through a validation process, was how it only works when you get buy-in. It's like, people in the sort of management level of the company are here trying to deliver, but there's a bunch of engineers, project managers, program managers that we think of as lower on the organization chart. You need their participation because that's where all the ideas are, because those are the people that are closest to the customers already. And I think that if you can really motivate, and this was one of the things, frankly, that impressed me about you guys, that first project we did together, you put out a call across the company, and And you were thinking we might only get 8 or 10 responses, and we got many, many responses, and we're able to be selective and take 24 teams, as I recall, for the first project, for the first set of projects, and engaging what I would call the grassroots of your organization. It ends up being critical, because you can't impose, if you just declare as a management team, as an executive team, oh, now we're going to start innovating and here's a program, without really engaging and giving motivation and reason, and really, I would argue, using our own language, creating a value proposition for your own team members, for your own associates, really thinking about your accelerator program, which you guys call the Bosch accelerator program, your innovation program, as itself delivering a value proposition, not only to the shareholders, not only to the management, but delivering a value proposition for this key customer segment, which is your associates, who are close to the clients, who are close to the customers, who are close to the problems they're facing. That ends up being a really critical success factor. And I had underestimated that, I think, before. I mean, I kind of suspected, but again, I came to corporate innovation more from a little bit of consulting background with Deloitte, but mostly from an entrepreneurial background. And in entrepreneurial settings where you only have 6 people or 10 people, it's just so different, because you're all in it together. And in these large, globally distributed or even nationally distributed, or even Mittelstand in Germany companies, if there's a management team that's only serving itself and the customers, that's critical. But if your innovation program can engage and serve and deliver value for the associates that they recognize as value, now you've unlocked the power of your human resources. And I think your organization, just because of the sheer scope of it, across so many business units, across so many geographies, really, really brought that home for me.
So maybe I'll share my learning, Uwe, then you, then we can sort of move towards the end. I think what I learned, and you said it, both you and Andre, when we came to you out at UC Berkeley, is that anybody can innovate. And the other warning you gave us was that you can't pick ideas up front, and that you'll be surprised by the ideas that end up succeeding or failing. And that takes time to internalize, especially when you've gone through traditional schools. You have an MBA, and MBA is supposed to just know based on the facts whether something's good or bad. But it really was true, one, that the ideas you think are good end up failing. The ideas you think that are absolute trash end up somehow managing to find a business model that works. But it also extends to the teams, that you can't pick teams up front, or some sort of special founder skill that will somehow generate business by virtue of their character. That's also true. So in the end, good ideas, good business models, and good teams, and probably even good founders emerge through this process. I think that was the thing that it took me a little while to really internalize, and maybe even get over a little bit of intellectual arrogance that is sort of bred by working in a corporate environment or coming from school. I would say those are the 2 major learnings I had.
Well, to build on that, I've had numerous learnings. As you can imagine, one of the most, I would definitely say, it's about, and we've been working on that topic at Bosch for a longer time now. Really, it's about setting up an innovation funnel, having a better understanding, how we would call it internally, which relative maturity an innovation project has, and how, because there will be always competition for resources in a corporate environment, also that you need to have this ability to rate one project after, even if they successfully validate their business model idea. There could be a even better idea in our organization, and this is of course true for any organization in the world, which has greater growth potentials, for example, or less investment risks, and that really drives your portfolio decision. So you need to have a portfolio map, not only for your existing core. You really need to do that also for your explorative ideas. Michael was announcing it. We are already coming to an end of our Vodcast, and traditionally, I have to add, we close our Vodcast with a sentence completion exercise.
Okay.
So, I would kindly ask you. I'm going to start a sentence, and I ask you to just terminate that sentence without adding a dot. Just maybe
Or a comma.
a comma is fine.
An ellipsis.
Simple sentences. A simple sentence completion exercise.
Yes.
Got it. All right. No whole paragraphs.
A very
I'll
easy one.
try to-
Yeah, a very
Try
easy.
to limit myself.
The majority of established organizations is failing because
They're failing at innovation because they are underestimating the importance of testing a lot of ideas in order to get a few successes.
nice. If you really believe in business model innovation, you
Step outside the comfort of technology and put the customer needs and problems first.
the first thing I will do after the pandemic will be
Go to a sporting event in person.
very nice. Thank you, Mark.
And maybe a cinema.
It was a pleasure having you on our podcast today. Let's accelerate. Stay tuned.
Okay, thank you for including me. Thank you both.
Bye.